Welcome to Second Plate, a show where we try to take a bunch of recipes that all come up together with the same ingredients to minimize waste. And today I wanted to tackle a problem where a lot of times I'll have ingredients like tomatoes, onions, your general stuff, but they always kind of serve the same purpose. And today I wanted to make salsa with homemade tortilla chips because it's something where it serves an entirely different purpose with the same ingredients. It's a side, or I know I'd love having it as a topping on, say, like eggs. So being able to make it yourself and kind of dial it in is a nice thing. First off, I'm going to take the onion I have from a previous show, as well as some green onions because they're a little bit sweeter and I enjoy them, some cilantro, as well as the more exotic stuff. I'm going to have 3 jalapenos, 2 mangoes, some garlic, and then I'm going to juice some limes. And then I'm just going to fill basically the rest of the salsa out with 3 tomatoes. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the onions here because I feel like they're the simplest to chop. So these, I like these because again, it solves the issue of there just being too much onion, because green onions are just simple, they're nice and contained, they're easy to wash and work with. They're basically already in strips. So I'm just going to go around and just kind of cut into them. Toss this. Really, I just really do like green onions, and I feel like sometimes people forget about them because they don't look like a normal onion, but it's so much simpler to have in your kitchen or just to buy kind of on the fly. I've noticed as I've been doing this cooking show, it's really helped me to be able to shop more frequently, if that makes sense, because I know that if I go out and buy one thing on a Tuesday, I can use it on a Wednesday, so I don't have to do these big batch shopping trips where I plan everything. I can just go and be like, you know what, I need one more thing. Let me go pick just that up. And I think green onions support that because you don't have this big weight on your shoulders like, oh, now I have to commit to eating onions for every meal for the next week. Looks like we got kind of just a bad part of the onion, so I'm just going to chop that off right away. Then, just like on previous shows, I'm going to slice into it horizontally. And then like this. I know knife skills are something that I've really taken a liking to, really trying to put a lot of effort into developing them, because it's something where you're really only saving yourself time. And it just goes faster and faster the more I do this. And one reason I like having a cooking show is because it lets me have more time to practice these things. By the way, this is just one small comment that I had actually heard from, I think, a friend, that when you scrape stuff off of a cutting board, you do it with the back of the knife because then it won't get as dull. It's just a tiny little thing, and I can't tell you if it has any profound effect, but it's just one of those things where you could share with someone. It's like, oh, you know what, that makes sense. I should do that. And it's just it's a nice little optimization, I guess. Go ahead and get some extra leaves off of here. Next thing I'm going to chop is cilantro. I know cilantro is fairly controversial. I guess it's a thing where some people taste cilantro and it's extremely potent. But I personally like it. I'm going to go ahead and just cut off these ends here, and the way I've kind of learned to cut, I guess, herbs is I like to just kind of roll them up a little bit. It's a little bit harder with cilantro because it's not a big leaf, but basically I'm trying to get it in a nice packed bundle. It doesn't have to be too exact because cilantro already is pretty much cut up, so I just want to get it down, but it's nice if you roll it up to have that tight little pack because it cuts better than me just kind of banging away at it. Okay, I'm just going to get it in a nice group. Really, it's that first cut is the one that really sets it up, where now I can kind of form it into, what I'm going to do is a rectangle. I'm going to switch to another knife. Important to have, I don't know what the style of knife is called, but basically I want a rounded edge, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the back. I'm going to chop, go up, chop, and just kind of walk the blade forward. And I'm going to do that basically until I decide it's finely chopped enough for me to put in. And this is one where as you get better and better, you can just go faster and faster. Plus, if I'm being honest, it's one of the more fun knife skills to do because you have, generally speaking, no chance of cutting yourself. Whereas if you were to do, say, something like a cat's paw where you cut towards your fist, it's like you shouldn't be able to cut yourself, but I still get concerned every time I practice that. So I'm not that confident yet. So I'm just gonna go to town. And what I like about doing this is it requires almost no attention. So a lot of times I like to just listen to like a podcast or like watch something or just like talk to someone is a very common one. This is a great thing to prepare in advance. Like I know for this, I've just been trying it on just various dishes, and it's something where I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll get home at like 4 and I want to cook at like 5. But when I just like relax and like watch something, I'll kind of just chop some cilantro because it's just a nice, simple, repetitive action, kind of unwind from work or while I wait for something else to finish up cooking. It's up to you for how fine you want this to be. The finer you have it, the more it's going to affect the final flavor. If you go really fine, you can really taste it, but you can't really see it. Whereas you can go the other way where you leave it fairly big and you don't taste it as much, but then you can really see the cilantro chunks. It's like one of the main ideas I kind of like behind doing a show like this is having recipes that aren't super exact, but rather you can just kind of dial in as you make it. I think I use that phrase so much, like I'm just gonna dial it in because it really is just that where, you know, if I decide, hey, I have a ton of tomatoes, which add like just a lot of mass, I know I can add just a little bit more cilantro. Or if I taste like, oh my God, that's way too much cilantro, it's not a big deal. Like cilantro is also super cheap, so it's not like it's a big deal if this goes bad. It's just a nice thing. Plus, anytime you chop herbs, it just looks like you clearly know, you must know what you're doing. Even though I think every time I've bought it for the first time, I'm like, I don't know, it's just a leaf. I'm just going to chop it in and then trust that someone smarter than me knows that this basil leaf goes with pasta better than cilantro or something. I will say, like, having people over when I was prepping to try this dish, having chopped cilantro in your fridge just implies you're a better cook than you may actually be, because it's like, oh, clearly, like, if you just have that on hand and you use that in a dish, that's awesome. So let me go ahead and clear this off. Next, I'm going to actually go to the garlic. Garlic's interesting because you either don't want it at all or you want a ton of it. So I'm going to crack into this garlic and split it. I guess this is one thing that I actually didn't know when I started using garlic is this is a bulb of garlic and this is a clove. I think I remember one time when I was like 14, I was making burritos and like, oh, a whole clove of garlic, and I put in a bulb, and it was pretty obvious after the fact that that was not right. I'll admit I'm not particularly great at chopping the small bits of garlic, so I actually have a garlic press. I just picked this up at a grocery store for like, I think like $5. All it is basically just a nutcracker for garlic. So I'm just gonna go ahead and there you go. See, it's coming out kind of nice. Let me go ahead and get my dish. And it's not a big deal. It's to have this. It's just something I noticed, like just using with this dish, it's just nice. It's convenient. Like if I want to use a lot of garlic, just say on a weeknight, or say instead chop it all at once so I have it on hand. It's nice just to be able to pull this thing out and go to town instead of honestly doing the annoying thing of finally dicing and chopping these little tiny pieces. And I'll admit, I'm a huge fan of just like random kitchen gadgets. You know, anything to make my time more effective, especially like something like with kitchen gadgets, it seems like it's so easy to make the justification where it's like, oh, it's like $5. I'll find somewhere to put it in my kitchen, and inevitably it's going to save me a ton of time. Next, I got jalapenos. Again, this is just my take. I like spicy food, but I'm going to chop it basically the same way I chop any one. They said, let me actually cut off the end here. And I've heard, although I haven't tested this theory, that if you don't like spiciness in your jalapenos but you want the flavor, You can pull out the white bits. Basically, that's where all the heat kind of comes from. But I like heat in my stuff, so I'm just going to go and dice that up. I have luckily been able to dodge any unfortunate, I don't know, jalapeno juice in my eye, but it's something I'm always vaguely aware of. Like, I just got to stay vigilant. Otherwise, this could be the time where I just lapse for 5 minutes, go to itch my eye, and then I am in a very bad position. That's nice. Fresh jalapeno is fun. I've mentioned on a previous show that I also like working with just bottled or canned peppers, because then you don't have to worry about cutting this tiny little thing or really getting it in your eyes. It keeps way longer, and I like to use, like, say, like the juice. Like, this is something where if you want a spicy salsa, but you don't want it to, you want it to be like really consistent, is I would just put the juice in and you can kind of really dial it in instead of, say, a salsa that isn't spicy at all except for like one section, and you're that guy that gets it on basically the one chip, and you just get all of the spiciness of the salsa in one dip. Next, these are mangoes. This is actually one of the main reasons I wanted to do this, is I'd never have a reason to buy mangoes, and it was a great excuse to learn how to work with them. So I'm going to attempt to peel it just using a Y peeler. And the reason I use a peeler is, like, the first time I went into a mango, I didn't realize how thick the core is in the center. It's basically like an apple, like an apple core, where it's not a hard, like, obvious thing like, say, an avocado. It just kind of gets thicker as you go through it. Plus, like with a lot of these dishes, if you notice a certain trend, I like having one or two kind of exotic ingredients, and I like having recipes that call for just interesting things. But if you absolutely need to, you can just do this with a small little knife, kind of carve into it. But with a peeler, you can usually get the most out of it. So once I have these mangoes peeled, I have to go in and actually cut them. It's not as easy as you would think, because there's actually this really hard core right in the center. I would compare it to, say, like an apple, where it's not like an avocado where it starts a very obvious seam where the core is. You just kind of have to keep cutting closer and closer until you hit it. It's very obvious when you do, because your knife will just completely stop. But I want to get as much of the mango as I can without basically getting the core. It's the main reason why I like to peel it. Is it's not really required, and I believe if you really wanted to, the skin's probably not terrible, but if you were to, say, cut that off, you're going to end up losing a lot of the mango that you could otherwise get. So yeah, starting to hit it. And you can tell when you hit the core, like, I would almost compare it to, it feels as if you're cutting through ice when you hit the core, because you can kind of force it, but it's definitely a little odd. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm basically trying to cut, say, a square or a hexagon around it. You got to feel around, because, like, for example, in this one, this core is kind of all on one side. It seems to have grown lopsided. So it's not as easy as just always going for the same exact thing. You can even see I kind of cut into the core right there, because it's really the same mass as the rest of the fruit. It's more fibrous, just like that really big center. And it's probably the most unique thing about working with, say, a mango over a more common fruit, is just getting around that core. So once we have that, we're just going to go ahead and dice these up. Cool. Going as big or as small as you personally want. I like big chunks because the main reason I wanted to include this mango is I've seen it done before, and I just think it's neat. I like including just neat little things that people may not have had before. But also, because it's something that's, I guess, the feature, I want a big chunk of it. Whereas, say, my cilantro or my tomato or my onions, people kind of know what those are, so you want all those flavors to mix in. But I want whoever dips into this to get a big chunk of mango and really get that. I also will say one thing that I've noticed, having made this salsa a couple times, is the reason it kind of works is just how juicy all the ingredients are. And there's no real, like, you don't add water or anything. It's just, as you slowly add more and more stuff to the salsa, it builds up basically the sauce. It's what makes it be a salsa rather than just, here's a bunch of chopped veggies that I threw into a bowl. And we're going to be using that with some salt and pepper, and then that's really what, in my eyes, makes it a salsa, is that sauce. And then the actual chunks of fruit and veggies, that's more of just the, I guess, the texture, or it's kind of there to, like, say, soak up all the flavor. So yeah, I might be grabbing a tomato, but that tomato, ideally, has soaked up all the sauces of all the other fruits, so like the mango, the jalapeno, green pepper, the cilantro, the salt, the pepper, all that. Okay. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put this straight into the bowl here, since by far mango is like the largest ingredient in this, so it takes up a lot of space, so I can't portion it out quite as nicely. Cool. Next, I'm going to follow up with tomato. I've done these a couple times on the show, so it's pretty much the same as you would normally cut a tomato. But this is the, I guess you would call the base of the salsa. It's not the most mass, but it's the defining thing of the salsa, where it's just like you have to have tomatoes, right? So I'm just going to quickly chop through a bunch of these, just going from the tip all the way down. Let's see if we go. There we go. Like I said earlier on in the show, one of the reasons I like using, like, say, a salsa dish is you can take things like tomatoes that are a couple days old, like you can tell just the softness of these, and it's a dish that lets you throw whatever you have into it. So I can take all these tomatoes and find a use for them, whereas if I was trying to make a sandwich out of these 6 tomatoes, I would never go through them all in time. Okay, I'm going to keep cutting that. Cool. One thing I personally just kind of picked up as, I guess you could call it a technique, is I really like to just let a tomato kind of shred itself as I get to the end. So ideally, I would want, theoretically, nice cube chunks of this tomato. But as I get deeper and deeper and the tomato just kind of tears it apart, I kind of like that. Like, I'm not going for that perfect cube. I just kind of want sections. And I like the idea of having a variety, because to be honest, if I wanted to have really juicy, easy tomatoes that are perfect cubed, I could just buy them canned, and then I wouldn't have to worry about them going bad. But I think it's one of the things that can kind of separate something that's like homemade from store-bought, is just those little differences. And it'd be hard to recreate it if you wouldn't want to sit down and do that yourself, but you know, when you make it yourself, you just kind of get those things that at the time you didn't plan out, but end up being just a hallmark of whatever you're making. Cool. I'm going to actually leave these other 2 tomatoes just for now, because since this takes up so much mass, I suppose, in the salsa, I want to have some in reserve in case I get all the way done with my salsa and then realize, man, these jalapenos are really strong. I want to have something I can add back in that takes it back down. Likewise, if they're kind of duds, or if I don't have enough of other ingredients, I don't have to just have a super tomatoey salsa. If you want less juicy tomatoes, which might sound like, why would you? What you can do is you can actually pre-chop these, and you can salt and drain them. I just have a little, I believe it's called a sieve, but basically just a wire mesh. You could use a strainer. And you just cut them, throw them all in there, you salt and turn them, and I usually just like leave them in my sink while I go do whatever else I have, and then you can get rid of a lot of the excess juice, as well as get the saltiness of the tomatoes just right. But like I said, I want a lot of juice because I want that all to like kind of mix in. It's going to make up a bunch of salsa. Cool. So we got it start forming here. So I'm going to start adding some salt and mixing this in now that we have the majority of the ingredients. Because everything else here, it will add flavor, but it's not going to add the same mass as the tomatoes and the mangoes are. So I want to get the salt kind of going and see what it tastes like. Cool. And then it just becomes a layer of add a little bit, taste it, add more, and you just do that for all the remaining ingredients. One thing I gotta say I like about salsa is what has really driven me for cooking is the how to make things easy to eat and not overcomplicated, as well as just simple things like, I like the idea of presentation. Because there's a lot of dishes, so say like the chicken Caesar salad I made last show, where really I could have just stopped with a salad and the chicken breast, but kind of putting them together just, it adds a little bit more to it. And I think with salsa, you can easily see how you immediately have like a bunch of really interesting colors that go alongside it, and it's visually just interesting. And that's why I like to add that mango, is like that yellow is pretty cool. And if I would go another step, I would also maybe use, I chose yellow onions because they're a little bit sweeter, but I like the idea with purple onions that they come across visually a lot more. Let's do a little cilantro. Gonna try and separate my garlic because it looks like it's sticking together. I think the other nice thing about adding your main ingredients first, like your giant mangoes and tomatoes, is theoretically if I wanted to make multiple versions of the salsa, so this is the spicy one, this is the more mild one, then what I could do is basically add everything up until that, take this out into another bowl, and then split them off. And then you could probably do something cool like add some kind of fruit that doesn't add a lot of flavor but is very visual and very colorful to market. So say if I use, hey, purple onions, that's the spicy one. If you have the yellow onions, that's the tame one. This is an idea I thought would be kind of neat. All right, so it's looking pretty good. We might have a couple large chunks of onion, but it's not a big deal. But really what I think of salsa is not so much these giant chunks I have over on one side, but when you get this kind of like paste, like that's really what I think of as the salsa. I feel like it's definitely a little more spice. I can tell my cilantro, my pepper. Well, it's not like a hot spicy, but you can tell they're stronger than average, I think, in this one. Which is interesting. Every salsa is different. I don't know how you would get about having a very consistent one that's always the same. So final thing is I'm just going to take 2 of my limes. I'm just going to get some juice in there. You could juice this. It's up to you how much you want. Honestly, in most cases, I find I never use up all my limes. So I would probably just buy lime juice because those would last much longer and you can really know exactly how much you're putting in or how much you're getting. Plus, I'm still working on how to pick out really good veggies, so I can generally pick an okay tomato, but I have a lot less experience with, say, a lime or certain brands of a pepper, even a jalapeno, which I use a lot. I'm really not exactly sure on the perfect sign. What I have here is just 2 simple, these are flour tortillas. You can use corn as well. I like flour because the way I kind of got around to this recipe is I would buy flour tortillas for other things, and that's why I would want to use this. But personally, for making chips out of them, if you're not going to literally fry them, I'd go with corn tortillas, but these should work fine. So I'm just going to cut them in half and then slowly go around and just cut them up however you want. If you want really big chips, cut them really big. If you want really small chips, cut them really small. Anything works. I'm going to take this, spread this down, and just kind of lay them out. I got this small oven set for 450. I am going to bake them. You can actually microwave them. That does work. Or if you really want really good chips, fry them. But I feel it's not quite worth the effort to really go all the way with frying tortilla chips unless you know you're going to make a lot. I had to do it a lot at a previous job, and it gets very greasy. Just everything gets coated. But the chips are really nice. Okay, I'm going to spray these down. This is just duck fat. I used to use just kind of canola oil to fry them, but I'm kind of experimenting that, just see how it kind of comes out. Next, I'm going to take my salt. Gonna try and lightly coat these because this is a pretty noticeable salt. But go however you want with this. If you want a lot of salt, just go nuts. And then I'm gonna ideally put some lime juice on each of these. If I was gonna make a whole batch, almost what I was thinking I would do is cook them out halfway and then pull them out and just get them in a bowl like we have with the salsa, full of lime juice and salt, and then just kind of toss them in that. I feel like that might be a little bit more consistent, but it's really up to you. It's something I think I'll try in a future version of this recipe. Right. And this is going to take maybe about 5 minutes. I like to just keep an eye on it because generally, just with the way tortillas are, some of them are going to cook really fast and others are going to take a little while and might kind of bubble up a little bit. Depends again also if you have flour or corn. So I like to leave these out and have it something I can dedicatedly look at because you don't really know how it's going to go until you sit and watch it. Once they're looking pretty good and nice and brown, I'm going to go ahead and grab these on out. I love these silpats because I can just go toss them right on. And then we have our chips and salsa. One reason I really like salsa and I feel like is a natural pairing with this dish is I'm always have leftover tortillas and of course salsa. So on the next show I want to follow this up with bringing and making some breakfast burritos because I like to make really small breakfast burritos and those are a natural pairing with the salsa and obviously the tortillas I made. And it's just a nice thing the day after you make salsa to make breakfast burritos, and we'll do that on the next second plate.